What's up, you guys? This is Devin with Century Effects Studios TV, back with another video, and today we're going to be teaching you guys how to update your Canon EOS camera firmware. So let's get started. I love the fact that you guys watched my video today, but the first and most important thing you need to understand is that this deals with the inner workings of your camera. So when you update the firmware, this is at your own risk. It could damage your camera if you do this wrong. Now, my information is based on what I've done in the past, and I have never had a problem with this process, so do it at your own risk. Here we go. Now, the first thing you need to understand is that your camera needs to be fully ready for this firmware update, which means you need a great battery life, which means 3/4 to a full battery charge on your battery. And you also need to make sure that you format your card. That's the best way to do it. You don't have to format your card, but it's best that you format your card so your camera won't get confused. Canon cameras come with SD cards or CF cards. Today, I'll be using this fancy CF card, but these same steps still work for your standard SD card. The next thing you need to do is go to Canon's official website for your region. Now, when you look at the top website address bar, you'll notice that it'll say .US or whatever region you're in. The next and one of the most important things about this process, you want to make sure you're on the official Canon website. You want to make sure that the web address looks official, that it's for your official region, so nefarious actors don't try to take over your equipment or your software. The next thing you want to do is find your correct camera. So if you have a Canon EOS R5 Mark I, you need to make sure it says Canon EOS R5 and not Canon EOS R5 Mark II, because those are two separate cameras. And if you download the wrong software for the wrong camera, you may end up damaging your camera, or even worse, making it unable to use. The next thing you want to do is you want to make sure you're on the correct operating system. I am on Windows 11, and Canon's software was able to detect that immediately once I gave them permissions. You need to also understand what version you're on versus what version you're trying to get in your firmware. If you're on firmware 1.5 and you need 1.6, you need to make sure you're clicking the correct firmware update. If you're on firmware 1 and you need firmware version 2, you need to make sure the numbers are correct. No, you do not have to have every firmware in succession. That means if you have 1.1, you need 1.2 to get 1.3. No, you don't need that at all. All you need to do is make sure that whatever firmware update you're doing, that it's actually an update. That means you're increasing in the number. So yes, that means if there is a firmware 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, you can jump from firmware 1.0 to firmware 1.2, skipping other firmware updates, because some firmware updates are not always successful. Now, here's a top tip from a pro. Not every firmware update is successful for the manufacturer. Sometimes you need to wait it out. Wait till other people update the firmware to see what kind of bugs there are, so you don't end up with those same bugs on your system. And then when the manufacturer figures out all those bugs, they'll put up another update. That's why there's so many firmware updates. Once you've downloaded the correct firmware update, the one that you want for your camera, you want to go to your downloads folder if you're from Windows. If you want to go to your downloads folder if you're from Mac. You want to make sure that you open the file, unzip it. You want to open the file, and you want to have the .FIR. .FIR stands for firmware. You want to make sure you have that file. You want to click, hold, and drag it over to your SD or CF card. Once you drag it over to your SD or CF card, you want to make sure that it is in the main directory of the camera. It should be in that main directory. It should not be in a separate folder in and of itself. It should not be inside the DCIM folder. It should not be in the MISC folder. It should just be right with the main directory of the camera card. Once you're done with that, take your CF or SD card out, and you want to put it back in your camera. You want to scroll over within your camera to your firmware section, or the yellow wrench icon for Canon cameras. You want to scroll all the way down till you see, or scroll over pages till you see firmware. It'll tell you what your current firmware is, and it'll give you the option, once you click into it, to update your firmware. You're going to do this. Once you click it, it's going to give you this old-timey Canon screen, probably one of the first screens they ever came up with. It's going to look a little antiquated. It's going to look a little bit less vibrant than the other screens, but this is what they do. Don't be alarmed. It will take, well, for me, it took about 2 to 4 minutes, depending on what software update you're coming from, where you're going, all these other things. Once it's done, it'll reflect the new firmware update within your system. So if you update it to 2.1 like I did, you should be able to see 2.1 on the camera. And that's how you know it was done successfully. I'm Devin with Century FX Studios TV. Thanks for watching the video, you guys. Links in the description on how you can support the channel, and stay tuned for the next video.